Hello there, thrill seekers, and let me address the complainers first today. I've gotten a bunch of complaints recently about the oldies videos that I was posting on Mondays and Fridays, and now I'm seeing if I can do a new video every Monday. We'll see how long that lasts. But people saying the sound quality is bad. Now, there was one video which I put up in the oldies, one of the oldies, where the sound was bad, I thought. The rest I thought were fine. And I guess what people are complaining about is that there's like echo sometimes, because often these are recordings from me speaking to an audience, and sometimes the microphone is not right up on my mouth, and sometimes it's out in the room, and you're getting the same degree of reverberation that the audience who were listening to it at the time was hearing and weren't complaining about. The other thing somebody was complaining about, when the dog barks, when Ziggy barks or an airplane flies over, you should edit that out. Okay, I edit it out most of the time, but a lot of times it's just the circumstances in which I'm recording these videos is that if I waited for every noise to stop and then edited all the things out around that, I'd be out here sitting at this desk all darn day and I'd never get anything else done. So sometimes I just leave it in because I just need to get through it. But here's the thing. You're talking to, when you're complaining to me about this, you're talking to a guy, me, who all my life I'd liked things that were obscure and difficult to find, which meant that, for example, if I wanted to see what was then the new Godzilla movie in the 80s or 90s, often I had to rely on a bootleg tape that was dubbed from somebody, like a 10th generation dub from somebody who'd gone to Japan somehow and copied the tape, so it was all fuzzy and weird, and I got used to looking at that. When I wanted to watch Ultraman when I was a kid, the only channel that was playing it was Channel 20 in Detroit, and I lived in Akron, and go look on a map. Akron's a long way from Detroit, so I had to watch this fuzzy, channel, which sometimes, some days just didn't come in at all. Beatles, big fan of the Beatles, so when I wanted to listen, like, oh my gosh, there's unreleased Beatles recordings, and I got used to listening to these bootleg records in which it's like all scratchy and weird, and I kind of enjoyed that. And you know who else enjoyed that? Is the guy from Guided by Voices. I think it's Robert Pollard? Anyway, I don't know how to pronounce his name. He once said he recorded the Guided by Voices albums on cheap equipment, the early ones, because he wanted them to sound like Beatle bootlegs. And I kind of like that. And part of what you're getting if you're going to look at something like Zen is going to be a bit of a murky picture. And I don't understand the generation that can't deal with sound quality or picture quality that isn't absolutely pristine, because you are cutting out of your life so much good and interesting stuff if you say that. Like my nephew, who I love dearly, won't watch black and white films. Like, what the hell is that? And he not even just on black and white, he won't watch anything made before like 1990 because all the quality is too bad. Like, really? Really? Seriously? You're cutting so much out of your life. Just let me put that forward. Now, today's topic has a little bit to do with that. Maybe not exactly. It's somebody put a question up on the blog about, I find it difficult to go with the flow, I think is what, I couldn't find the comment again when I looked for it this morning, so I don't know if it was deleted or if I'm just too stupid to figure out where it was, because I can't remember what video it was on. But anyway, it was a comment about going with the flow, and the commenter apparently thought that the point of Zen was to go with the flow, and that he wasn't able to do that. So I referred him to a video I'd done called I think When Everything is Destroyed, something like that, and it was a reference to Book 1. 24, Koan 24 in Shinji Shobogenzo Dogen's Book of Koan. And I'll read it to you, even though I read it about a month ago for that video. One day a monk asked Master Daizui Hoshin from the Eki district, when the eternal fire comes and all 3,000 worlds are being destroyed, will this world also be destroyed? Actually, as I said in the earlier video, what he actually says is, will this also be destroyed, not this world. So, anyway, worry about that later. Master Daizui Hoshin said, "It will be destroyed." The monk said, "If this is true, I would like to follow circumstances." Master Daizui Hoshin said, "Yes, we should follow circumstances." Now, we should follow circumstances. This is Nishijima Roshi's commentary. We should follow circumstances is a famous saying of the Chinese master Joshu Jushin. It means that we should follow the rule of the universe. The monk seems to have had some doubt about this principle if the circumstances include the destruction of the world. The master affirmed that we should follow circumstances even if we are on the eve of the Great Fire. The Great Fire represents the limits of reality. We can make our plans and efforts, but in the real world, things do not always go our way. Our plans may go awry, or we may discover we are trying to change something that cannot be changed. The Buddhist attitude is to accept and deal with the reality of the situation, even if that reality is not one we would have chosen. So that's the koan, or that's the commentary. There's a little bit more to the commentary, but we can leave that aside for now. So what I did this morning for you folks out there is I went through Shobogenzo looking for the word circumstances and how that word is used and what is being translated. And the most interesting bit I got was a footnote that appears in a chapter called Shinjin Gakudo, Learning the Truth with Body and Mind. And the line says, this is what Dogen says, "Everyone has the state of just following circumstances, at which moment falling walls allow us to learn the 10 directions, and the absence of gates allows us to learn the 4 quarters." And that little bit about 10 falling walls and blah 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 is a reference to a quote, "In the 10 directions there are no falling walls, in the 4 quarters there are no gates. Reality is open, completely naked, bare, utterly clear, and without anything to grasp." Okay. So, the part I was really kind of interested in is this just follow circumstances. And just follow circumstances is Nishijima Roshi's translation of the phrase zui ta ko. Zui ta ko. So zui means follow, ta means others or the external or circumstances, and ko is literally gone, which is emphatic. It suggests that the action described has been performed completely. Zui ta ko, just following circumstances, represents a compromising as opposed to a willful attitude. The phrase appears in the following story, and then he gives the koan that I just told you a moment ago. And it's kind of interesting to me linguistically that zui character, it literally means be at the mercy of the waves, and it has been largely replaced by a more modern character, which is pronounced shitagao, which means to obey, follow, or yield to. There are 2 other sets of Chinese characters that are often translated into English as circumstances, and one is kyo, or boundary, sphere, or circumstances, and other is kyogai, or kyokai, boundary or environment. And these are translations into Chinese of the word vishaya, which is translated often as object. This means boundary, environment, sphere of influence or activity, dominion, kingdom, scope, reach of, and an object of the senses. And there are 5 objects of the senses. There's sabda, sound for the ear, sparsa, tangibility for the skin, rupa, form or color for the eye, rasa, savor for the tongue, and gandha, odor for the nose. These 5 vishayas are sometimes called the gunas, which I've mentioned because that comes up in the Advaita Vedanta tradition. They talk about gunas a lot. These are properties of the 5 elements: air, earth, water, fire, ether. Is that right? 5? Ether, air, fire, water, earth. Got it. And there are a lot of quotes in Shobogenzo about circumstances, and I collected a whole bunch of them, but I feel like I'm going to go on forever if I give you all of them, but maybe we'll save those for another time. The idea of going with the flow or following circumstances is one that sort of the urban dictionary version of Zen would probably tell you that Zen is going with the flow, And that's not entirely untrue. But at the same time, the idea that the venerable Zen master is a person who's just going with the flow, man, all the time, whatever it is, like that hippie teacher you had if you grew up around the era that I grew up, who's maybe there still exist, the hippie teachers, I guess, the going with the flow thing is, as I said, not entirely untrue, but it usually doesn't work exactly like that. It doesn't mean that you have to be like, yeah, I'm going to the flow, I'm happy with whatever happens, man, that's great, that's groovy. That's not the way it is, but it's an understanding, a deep understanding, that you have no choice but to go with the flow. That the flow, the circumstances, the environment you find yourself in, and you yourself are not two distinct and different things. So we get this idea that we could possibly go against the flow. There's this sort of idealistic notion that there's something to be gained by going against the flow. I don't like the flow, so I'm not going to go with the flow. I'm going to resist the flow. But you can't resist the flow. And that's the point. You're going to be with this flow whether you like it or not. And what does Nishijima Roshi call it in his footnote? It represents a compromising as opposed to a willful attitude. So that's how he puts it. So compromising is kind of a funny word, but it is it is the ability to see that even if things are not to your liking, that you, me, I am also part of these circumstances which I now find not to meet to my liking, which doesn't mean you won't get frustrated or upset. I certainly do sometimes at lots of different circumstances. I could tell you what they are, but then, you'd get all stuck on those various circumstances that I'm frustrated by and go, you shouldn't be frustrated by those. It's, whatever. These kind of arguments can ensue if you get into those kind of discussions. What's more important is that it doesn't mean you have this attitude where everything's cool. It's just that it's more of an accepting attitude. And if you can't find that accepting attitude, that's also fine. Your feeling that you can't accept the circumstances you find yourself in are part of the circumstances that you're finding yourself in. So accepting even the fact that you can't accept this is also useful. But the only way to find that flow is, that I know of anyway, to ability to go with the flow, the only way to find that ability to go with the flow is Zazen. And I'll give you my own example from this morning. I don't know why, but sometimes Zazen is a frustrating experience for me, and probably always will be. It happened more in the beginning than it does now, but it's still frustrating, and this morning was difficult Zazen. Again, I have no specific reason why. I have no idea. It was my birthday 2 days ago, so does that have something to do with it? I don't know. But anyway, just found it really difficult. And I have this timer that I use to time my Zazen, and sometimes the timer goes wrong. And so if it feels like I've sat too long, I'll look at it, and every once in a while I look at it, and the timer has stopped working, and I don't know how long I've sat. But usually when I look at it, it's still going, but it's I'm about 2 or 3 minutes away from the end. I'll look at it, and it'll say 2 or 3 minutes left, and I'll go, okay, well, I just misjudged the time. Well, sometimes it's like I think, well, this timer has not gone off, and I go and pick it up, and it says 15 minutes left. And I'm like, oh, really? So it just feels slow and frustrating. And this frustration of Zazen, I think, is a great way to learn how to go with the flow or to follow circumstances, because you sit anyway. You don't get up, even if, well, this is my way of doing it. Maybe yours isn't, but I think your best bet is to just sit and not give up. And even if it says 15 more minutes and you're like, oh God, I'm so done with this stuff, just sit some more with it. Another piece of advice I often give to people when they ask me how long to do Zazen is sit as long as you can stand it and then add 5 more minutes. And those extra 5 minutes at the end where you just can't stand it anymore, I think are extraordinarily instructive. So there's my best advice on going with the flow, and I hope it helps you go with the flow. And if you want to help me go with the flow, you can find this URL that you're seeing on the screen below, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. There you will find my PayPal and Patreon links. Those are my main and generally only ways of making a living, so I really appreciate your support. But as always, this is offered for free, so you don't gotta pay if you don't want to pay. So we will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. Bye. Follow circumstances. Okay, Ziggy, what are your circumstances? Are you following them? You always follow circumstances. You're pretty good about that. Alright. Talk to you later. Bye, Ziggy.